Everyone, welcome back. And I was supposed to film this on the 4th of July, but I was out of town, so I will be making this video, which could be a new 4th of July special. So, what if America formed an empire? So, there was some wild ideas of Trump that he wanted to annex the entirety of Canada and get Greenland from Denmark. So, what if that happened? So, first of all, America turns red and decides to go imperial. If it could let me. So, the first thing it'll do is declare war on Canada. And NATO will not be able to help out since I'm disbanding all alliances. So the first thing they would do is try to go for Canada, but it would be a little bit hard for them to advance into northern Canada since it's very cold up there. So, with this as a surprise attack, troops from Alaska, if I can zoom in, the troops from Alaska would be slowly entering the border with Canada, and then soon, and a massive invasion happens over here in this province, slowly connecting up with the Alaskan troops, soon connecting with Alaska, soon making a bigger front line, soon connecting with that front line, and then the special forces will go forward and go up. They would try to capture the mainland of Canada instead of getting these islands. So, but over here, the main focus is on Ottawa. So, troops would enter this part of Canada through Michigan, and then New York, and then soon they would advance. And then with Canada being now fully mobilized, they would send their troops down to Maine. And then soon, Maine falls, and so does the rest with New England. So, with the Canadians going towards Washington, D.C., the Americans would have to put their troops back out just to fight on the front line in the New England region. So, with a stalemate happening in southern Maine, they would try to get a lot of their troops back up to here, on the way to Ottawa. And then soon, with the Quebec movements wanting to become independent, they would try to help the Americans advance into Canadian territory. And then soon, they're able to split Canada into two, and then get Quebec a little bit more, and then soon going over to the captured area in Maine, and then soon, a while ago Ottawa fell, but they decided to go for more. So over here, they managed to push the troops out of Maine entirely, and then start another line over here, making this part of Canada fall, and then getting this island. So by then, the Canadian people and the Canada's government want to ask for peace, since their capital already fell, even though the Americans haven't done that much damage, they still want to ask for peace. So the Americans agree, and let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, so here's the peace treaty with the Americans annexing the the southern part, the mainland of Canada, while releasing Quebec from Canada, but also making Quebec a puppet state of America. So the next thing they would do is look south and decide that they want to go after Panama because of the recent ties with the Panama Canal. So they declare war on Panama, and then they send their troops down, and then a landing happens, another one happens, and another happens. Eventually, Panama falls, and they surrender. So let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, so here's the peace treaty with Panama, and here we see in a puppet state made in Panama for letting the Americans using the Panama Canal more freely. So so America decides to look a little bit more north, and they decide to go for Greenland. So they declare war on Greenland, but since Greenland isn't an independent country, it's controlled by Denmark, which means Denmark was also brought up into this war by the Americans. They tried to ask Denmark for Greenland 2 times already, probably, but Denmark refused it. So, and I mean, Trump even decided to buy Greenland from Denmark, but they still refused. So a lot of the American troops would be going up to Greenland, while some would be going over to Denmark. So over here in Denmark, some American troops would slowly arrive at the border, one going in the north, one in this part, one over here, another near the Copenhagen Island, one taking over this whole entirety of the island, another one here, and then eventually they all capture the mainland of Denmark, and then slowly going over to Copenhagen. I think that's how it's pronounced, but soon Copenhagen falls. And then soon they would go over to Greenland, and a big landing was made in southern Greenland, and then they start advancing. And then soon the people of Greenland soon surrender over to the Americas. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here we see full annexation of Greenland, while the Americas made Denmark into a puppet state. So now, technically, America borders Germany, and there's probably a bridge in Denmark and Sweden, but I don't know. But now America is now European, probably. I don't know how it works, but I guess that's how it works over here. So they decide to look south again and decide to attack 2 more countries. So they declare war on Mexico and Cuba. So with many landings happening in Cuba, and with the people's help, Cuba falls pretty fast. And then American troops start storming into Baja California, eventually taking the whole entirety of it, and then slowly moving down on all sides, making one big front. And then soon it was stalemated. Then the troops from Cuba start going to this part of Mexico, making another front. And then soon it gets very big. And then they start threatening Mexico City. So then some troops in the north go down to the south to push them back. But that also means the Americans in the north can also advance. So being faced on two sides, Mexico surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here we see some annexation basically America annexing the majority of Mexico, including Mexico City, and then making the middle part of Mexico into a puppet state along with Cuba, and then the southern part of Mexico is left alone. But since it's in a very bad state, they decide to join Guatemala. So they proposed the idea to the president, and then they decided to annex the rest of Mexico. And then soon Belize realizes, and then they decide to join Guatemala too. So Guatemala is now the biggest country in Central America. So they decide, they look at the map again, and then they realize that they could stop here, but why? Let's just attack more countries. And then the year comes around, Quebec gets independence from the US. So now they're a fully independent country, recognized by all countries, but now they got mad. So they declare war on Quebec. So Canada, the rest of Canada sees this, and then they foolishly declare war on the Americas, hoping to reunite with Quebec and get their old territories back. So with some troops over here on the border of the Americas, they weren't fully prepared, so Canada does a full-scale invasion, and then eventually they get into Alaska, and then fully capturing it, and start moving south. Even though Canada doesn't have that much manpower, they were able to get a lot of resources from other countries. And then Quebec starts another invasion, but then that was stalemated, eventually cut off, and then wiped out. So the American troops just start storming into Quebec freely. They get this island, and then eventually Quebec falls. And then they do a naval invasion, and the troops from Greenland start heading in the north and then start invading. Realizing this, the Canadian troops start pulling back from Alaska. And then soon, eventually, they were able to push them out back into the Canadian territory, just to push the Americas back out of their northern, but they were unable to push them out completely, making another invasion happen. And then soon they connect, and then the rest of Canada falls. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty with Canada and Quebec. So the American forces annex the entirety of Quebec and the entirety of Canada. So with this, they could attack a little bit more in Central America, but they're too exhausted. They could go for Russia over here, but that could be that could lead to nuclear war. And they could go over to Europe, getting Iceland and the UK, but the UK also has nukes. They could go for, I mean, I don't think Iceland has an army, so they decided to go for Iceland, and then Iceland falls pretty fast, capturing the capital. And now let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, so we have full annexation in Iceland. So they decide to not attack any more countries, to not anger anyone. So they decide to stop here. And now this is the American Empire with Trump's proposes to the new country. So hopefully y'all liked the video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.